Hi, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Monthly Truth. This time I'm joined by someone I absolutely adore, Dimple Khatiri. Dimple is a mental health pharmacist, a powerful PMDD advocate, and someone who knows firsthand what it means to live with PMDD. She's not only working to make sure PMDD is better understood and represented within the NHS and wider healthcare systems, but she's also created something really special. A global WhatsApp community where women with PMDD can connect, share their experiences, and feel safe and supported. This episode is for you if you're feeling overwhelmed, disconnected, or like you just need to take a moment to breathe. Dimple brings so much clarity, calm, and truth to this conversation. It's the perfect reminder of who you are and that you're not alone. So let's get into it. Hi, Dimple. Thank you so much for joining us and being on this episode. I've been so excited to chat with you. I know we had like a bit of a conversation at the PMDD Project's first birthday, and just for anyone that was able to attend, we did a panel discussion and you were one of the panelists, and your insight was just incredible. I think you bring such an amazing perspective. So I couldn't wait to speak to you again. So yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I've been really excited about this too, and glad we finally agreed on a day.
Yeah. PMDD's definitely got in the way of us being able to sort a date out, but we got there.
Exactly, definitely.
So I always ask people this at the beginning, because I myself would probably describe PMDD in a very different way to how you might describe it. I call it the unwelcome visitor that comes every
Yeah.
month, and I just really don't want them to be there. In just a few words, how would you describe PMDD?
I feel like it's a dark cloud that comes every single month. When actually I just want just the sunshine to be shining all throughout the month. But yeah, it's a dark cloud that arrives every single month without fail. And then slowly disappears, and then it's back to sunshine again.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, you do bring a really great perspective, not least because of your career, but also because you have PMDD yourself. So can you share a little bit about your journey with PMDD and when you first realised that, I don't know, maybe something's just a bit different, it's not just PMS?
Yeah, I think so. For me, when I look back at it, I've had PMDD, I think, since I was 17. And I was having symptoms every single month. But I think the difficulty with me with firstly, we weren't exposed to knowing what this was. So I put it down as just extreme PMS for years. Probably until my sort of actually until a few years ago, to be fair. So, I'm 36 now. So that's been nearly half of my life. But I think with my symptoms as well, it kind of tied into being in a bad relationship as well at the time. And so I never really fully acknowledged that there's something else going on here. I thought it was just more circumstances around me. Um, but yeah, I never really looked into it. The first time I sought help was probably when I was 23, 24. But again, I was just put on an oral contraceptive, didn't agree with me, didn't think anything more of it, just carried on, every single month, going through the symptoms of, yeah, just feeling, really low mood, tearful, lack of motivation, the irritability, the anger, um, and then accompanying that was always the suicidal thoughts. Um, and I recalled as well, like there were multiple times when I was in, kind of from 17 till 19 or whatever it may be, and when it would happen, I'd find myself like on my roof, because my roof was where I lived with at my mom's was like an extension, so it would happen every single month, and I'd be having these thoughts and be on the roof and not not wanting to end it, but I did want to end it, because that's just what was going on. And again, I just never shared that with anybody, and I just carried on going through this all the time. And I think the first time that I actually sought help to then be prescribed antidepressants was literally when I think we've had this conversation, but driving to a training session one day and feeling just so overwhelmed that I was just thinking, I just want to crash my car. I want to go off the motorway. And I thought, no, something's wrong here. And then, yeah, I sought help. But again, no one really asked me. kind of it was, I feel like with my profession, I think it's almost clouded, like when my experiences with GP. So they almost do just, I think, just sort of listen to what maybe I suggest because I've done my research beforehand.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, and then I was on an antidepressant ever since until this February I came off it.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say as well that sort of being a healthcare professional probably impacted the way you got that diagnosis then. And do you think, because obviously you've probably done a lot of research into your own conditions based on your symptoms, based on your healthcare profession as well, like having that knowledge. But do you think maybe was there ever times when they just didn't ask if the symptoms you were experiencing were connected to, your hormones, your cycle? Did they
Never.
never make that link?
Never, not at all. I mean, it's only, and I it's interesting because I look back at like I had requested some blood tests a couple of years ago, and when they did my hormonal levels, my levels were all within range. But what stood out for me was the progesterone was still on the lower end, and for I couldn't remember exactly where I was in my cycle, but regardless, it was still within range, but on the lower end, and that just made me think, well, if someone had picked that up in relation to how I'd been feeling and just kind of put all the dots together, maybe I could have got help sooner. But I
Yeah.
think maybe partly was my fault as well because I wasn't forthcoming with all of my symptoms, and I also just dismissed it as extreme PMS because I hadn't even heard of the term PMDD, and and I've been working in mental health for 11 years, so I think that's still just crazy to me.
I really get that though, how when you go to the doctor and you go and seek help, you don't give all your symptoms. I don't think I did either. I think I just said like whatever symptoms I was most concerned about in that moment, I would share, but I'd miss out so many other symptoms. And actually, could that have helped me, get the support I needed earlier? Probably, but it's also a case of we didn't know what PMDD was when we were in that room, so it comes with just sort of raising that awareness, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Um, and you've mentioned sort of a little bit about your treatment options and what you've explored, what you haven't. How has PMDD sort of impacted your day-to-day life, and how are you coping with it now?
PMDD has affected me so much. I think when I think back and I think, I've just pushed and pushed through like my career, my academic, kind of my academic side as well, because I've been doing constant like postgraduate qualifications throughout. And I think for me at work particularly, it's been very challenging, like especially if I've moved new jobs. I feel like already I have that heightened sensitivity and hypervigilance, but then when PMDD hits, it's quite concerning because I feel like I need to withdraw. I feel very incompetent, I get imposter syndrome, and it's been really difficult, like challenge, like navigating that. And um I've never really disclosed to any of my employers up until this my current employment. I did prior to that, but I didn't get the response that I quite needed. Um, but it's been really challenging. I mean, I just, it would be that I remember like when I was working in GP practice and I'm seeing patients back to back to back, but in the middle, like after each patient, I would cry and then have to pick myself up and see the next patient. And it was just exhausting because on top of the emotional feelings, the brain fog, the fatigue, there were times where I'd just be thinking, what am I doing here? Like I should not be here. But I think for me as well, I've got I put so much stigma around it, and perhaps not knowing what I was dealing with at the time, that I just carried on pushing through as I'm sure most people do, because you feel like you don't want to let your work down, and you feel like you don't want to get to a point where you're judged by taking sick days, etc. And yeah, I've just come to realize that actually prioritizing your well-being is far more important than anything else.
100%. It's so interesting hearing you talk about it because I resonate with everything that you've said. All the symptoms that you've experienced, I completely resonate with. And I think that brain fog and just that inability to be motivated in what I'm doing, when usually I care so much about my job, is a real challenge. But then I think it's so interesting to hear your perspective as a healthcare professional, because I never think about that side of things. I think a lot of people sometimes assume that the healthcare professional will know everything, and they've got all the answers, so that when you've got PMDD yourself, that is a whole other challenge. And when you're having to support other people and their well-being whilst managing your own, I can't even imagine how difficult that is. I mean, the fact that you're crying in between appointments just goes to show how hard it is to juggle. But yeah, I suppose I'd love to know, have you found any strategies then that have helped you maintain that professionalism whilst also making sure that you're okay as well?
Yeah, I think kind of when I've been in between jobs having that time out, I think I really was able to understand what would help me. So I think kind of openly communicating with my partner has been massive, because again, I think I tend to mask a lot of things. And so that also becomes really exhausting in itself. Whereas I feel like if I'm able to be quite open at home, then it allows me to have a safe space to be able to, kind of communicate with whatever is going on. But I have found, so I created a WhatsApp group back in November, I think. So I go to therapy once a week, and my therapist has actually, kind of suggested it. And I I did it, and that has been a massive, massive support for me. I think just having a safe space as well with other people who have either got PMDD or suspecting it, honestly, like I can't even describe like how that's just transformed everything for me. Because to feel seen and heard and validated, where you don't often get that, especially like when you're going to healthcare professionals. I mean, I think that's a commonality between all of us, is that everyone has felt quite gaslighted by the medical professionals, sadly. And so I think what's really nice is that, if I'm having a bad day, or if I'm having, just feeling in that luteal phase of the PMDD, knowing that I can share with this group and someone is going to reply it, because there's people in all different time zones, and I just know someone's going to be there to support me, and there's no judgment whatsoever. If I'm saying I'm having these suicidal thoughts, they're not going to be thinking, or like, what on earth? Whereas I just think to have that kind of lived experience just gives you more of a greater understanding. Uh,
100%. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm part of the WhatsApp group, and anyone listening, I would encourage them to join it, because ever since joining it, I actually do feel like these messages come through, and like you said, it's different time zones. It's people from all around the world, which is actually really, really sad, because I hate people going through the same thing, but really like validating to know that it's a worldwide thing,
yeah,
and that there's people out there that will get how I'm feeling. And when some of the messages come through, it's like I've written them,
yeah,
because
yeah,
the way they're feeling, and I might be in a different stage of the cycle to them, so I might be able to, think about what to reply to them to get them through it, or I might be in the same stage as them and just read it and go, "Oh my God, that's exactly what I'm
yeah,
feeling." And like you said, it's like having that space to say it without feeling like you're going to get judged, because anything that gets said in there, I don't ever think, "Oh God, she needs help," or "Oh God, what, I've never felt that before." It's so relatable and it's so safe. And I just think that's it's such an empowering thing and necessary thing for the PMDD community, when, like you've touched on, not enough medical professionals know about it. So that kind of gives us a little bit of like anxiety, a bit of, I don't know, it makes us doubt ourselves, I suppose. So yeah, I
definitely.
think it's amazing what you're doing, definitely.
Thank you.
And kind of touching on the lack of understanding, I suppose, in the medical field. Why do you think that is? Like, what do you think the biggest gaps are in understanding, and what do you think needs to change?
I feel like, so with PMDD, I think there's a lot of symptoms that can overlap with other kind of mental health conditions. So, things like ADHD, bipolar, then obviously you've got your depression, anxiety, even emotional unstable personality disorder. So I think naturally when someone presents because they will go to their GP first, I think there's a couple of things there, 10-minute appointment. is just not enough time. And I don't know about you, but even for me, I feel so anxious with getting everything that I need to say in 10 minutes. It's just not enough time at all. So I think there are definitely missed opportunities for that information kind of in as a whole to be delivered to the GP or whoever it is, because people just already have their anxiety, and um I guess they're kind of reserved as well with sort of the response that they'll receive. But
Yeah.
I think with PMDD as well, I think it's only being more recognized with more people coming forward, like celebrities, that we're aware of. But otherwise, other than that, it's really easy just to dismiss it as something like PMS, or it's easy to, I don't know. I think women's health in general, that's kind of the underlying theme, where there's just, women's health is not, and there's not as much focus on it. I mean, it's getting better, but I think people aren't quick to link the fact that actually some of these things, it may not just be depression. Like, someone may be coming to you with low mood, but actually it's being professionally curious to ask more questions around, what else is going on. Because I think if you don't get a holistic picture, it's really easy just to be able to diagnose it as depression or PMS or whatever it may be. And so I think there's yeah, kind of the lack of timing, which is just, or inadequate timing
Huge. Yeah.
in GP appointments.
Yeah.
But I think also there is just a lack of education from my perspective in curriculums as well. So I mean, I can speak as a pharmacist, I don't ever recall learning about PMDD ever. I think if I had, then I would have caught this a lot sooner of what's going on. But even I suspect even in the medical profession, that it may be like touched on, but I think, the same way that menopause is now getting so much
Mm.
more recognition, I feel like PMDD shares so many similarities, but yet it's still not quite picked up on, even with our age group, or even going up to perimenopause.
Yeah. No, you're so right. And I think you are right. I think it's all about that holistic approach as well, isn't it? It's about like taking into a consideration, the healthcare professional taking into a consideration all these different factors that could be contributing to someone's PMDD. Because also we need to remember that PMDD affects everyone quite differently because the symptoms are so varied. It does impact one person very differently to the way it might impact another person. And so you can only really understand whether it's PMDD or not, or how severe that PMDD is, by getting to know them on a holistic level. And 10-minute appointments aren't going to do that.
No,
So
not
I
at all.
think there's a lot of things that sort of need to change with it. But yeah, I think you're spot on. I speak to other healthcare professionals, um, clinicians, GPs who have said that they've never been taught PMDD. And I mean, that's shocking. It really is. And I think there's a long way to go before PMDD gets recognised as the serious condition that it is. But I also think that like there's nothing wrong with doctors saying, I've never heard of that before. I'm not too sure, but I'm curious to learn more. Because that actually was the most life-changing thing for me. When I found out what PMDD was, I went to my GP, my 11th GP, and said, I've got PMDD. And he was like, I've never heard of it before, but leave it with me. I'm going to go and do some research and we'll see if this is what's it for you. And just the fact that I'm not expecting him to know every single condition under the sun, but just the fact that he was willing to go and take time to learn more about it and listen to me as a person it made such a difference. And I know this person doesn't have a lot of time because he's a GP, like he's got so many of the patients to see, but he took that time to care and learn. And I think, yeah, that just gives me so much hope that just being curious to learning more about it is amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, I don't think anyone expects, it's like you say, no one expects anyone to know A to Z of all conditions. But I think it's just what I've learned, particularly, is that, patients are that they're experts of their own body, and so it's just listening to them, because actually they'll have most of the answers that the question that you're asking, they have most of the answers. And so it is just about listening and actually being quite honest. And like you say, with the experience you have with your GP, I'm not sure, but validating that person that I'm interested in what you're saying and I will get back to you, because that individual is saying I value what you're saying and I'm taking you seriously. And I think that's probably a commonality that I'm seeing with now speaking to, like, obviously with the women in the group particularly, and being at the first birthday of the PMDD project, is that no one felt listened to, and having to push and push to just get that one person is like a breakthrough, and it shouldn't be like that. It should just be at that first point. Just, and now it makes sense why it takes up to 12 years for someone to get diagnosed with it. It's completely unacceptable.
Definitely, 100%. And I think also a lot of that stems from the fact that I think with women's health conditions as a whole, but I think, with menstrual health conditions, I think we've always just been taught to just put up with it. It's if you experience periods, you're really lucky to, and it's a really natural
Yeah.
thing to experience. So just put up with it. I think women do have a high pain threshold, high tolerance for taking shit. So I think we just crack on with it, and we
Yeah.
don't want to admit that actually I'm really struggling with my period. Not my friends don't seem to be struggling, but I really am, and I think that actually took me a long time to admit and be okay with. So I think a lot of it is to do with stigma as well, and just actually not normalizing, but identifying that there are conditions that need to be taken seriously, and they have real serious mental health consequences as well.
Certainly. I yeah, completely agree.
So what then are your hopes for PMDD awareness and advocacy over the next 5 years, let's say?
So one of my hopes is I really want PMDD training to be rolled out across the NHS. I think, just speaking from myself personally, is that, I think it will help women massively if, anyone that's able to access that kind of learning, who work with women, whether it's as patients, whether it's as colleagues, it's just about spreading that awareness. And if we know that the healthcare kind of industry has got the lack of training, and it may be it, I know that, again, I was mentioning to you, there, within the kind of the mental health field with psychiatry, and for psychiatrists, there is training available. But for me, I want this training to be available to everybody, because I think this is the only way that we're going to get this condition and what the severity and the debilitating effects of it to women every day, it's going to be heard. I think, otherwise it just, yeah, I mean, obviously all the campaigning and everything that's being done is definitely, it's definitely bringing things to the forefront. But I do think, like, people go to their healthcare professionals first, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a GP. It could be a nurse, it may be, I don't know, a social prescriber, it could be an occupational therapist. But I think it's just everyone having a basic level of understanding about it, to just be able to recognize some signs. If someone came to them and said, "Oh, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z," to just, again, have that professional curiosity. But I think without that knowledge, people will just be
Yeah.
ignorant otherwise.
I love that idea, actually. I think that's so important, because I think when the PMDD project think about rolling out healthcare training on PMDD, I think our first port of call is to go to GPs. But actually, because I think that's everyone's first port of call, to go to a GP when they're not feeling well or something's not right. But actually, you might be having a conversation with a pharmacist. You might go into the pharmacy and say, look, I just need some advice. You might just have a conversation with a nurse when you're in hospital about something unrelated. You might be speaking to your occupational therapist, and they might recognize that what you've got is PMDD, and that is going to just quicken that diagnosis process so
Exactly.
much quicker. So I think, yeah, you're so right by just rolling that out to all healthcare professionals and just letting them know what it is and how to look out for the signs would be a game changer, definitely.
Yeah, and again, I've seen it firsthand. Even just like, my husband's a pharmacist, just my experience of PMDD has now kind of obviously filtered to him. So now he's able to recognize
Wow.
when he's reviewing patients, because he works in a GP practice. Actually, he's asking the question to then acknowledge this person has potentially got PMDD. And I think it just takes just that one person just to, just to kind of spread the word, and then, be able to,
So,
yeah. So that is my big goal for the next 5 years. I would love to see that within the NHS.
I love that. And it gives me hope hearing that your partner is, people are going to be listening to him asking those kind of questions and being like, oh, I might ask that question now. And it's just going to have like a knock
Yeah,
on effect. It's like a snowball effect, isn't it? So
exactly.
that's really, really great to know. So what advice would you give to someone newly diagnosed with PMDD, especially if they're, in a demanding career like yours?
Oh, good question. Had you asked me this a year ago, I probably wouldn't have known what to say. But I think now I would say it's really important to have that work-life balance, your career is your career, and totally understand that, but your health and well-being, like your mental health, your physical health, are all so important. And it's really important to prioritize that and take time out, acknowledge where you are, where you may get potentially burnt out, where
Yeah.
you may take things on, particularly in your follicular phase, where you feel like you're superwoman and can, take things on, and then by the luteal, you're struggling. But I think it's just really important to be aware of your cycle, work around it, and make sure that you're not cramming too much in. And I think the main thing is just to be kind and compassionate to yourself. Um, because unfortunately with PMDD, 50% of your cycle, you are going to feel like this amazing kind of career person and can do anything. But then the other 50% of your cycle makes you feel the absolute opposite. But that's not you. That isn't the real you. That is the unwelcome visitor that kind of turns up every month. So yeah, I guess the bottom line for me really is just prioritize your health and well-being, because you only get one life. And I know that does sound quite,
It's true.
yeah,
I love what you said there about how, and I think I need to listen to this as well, how, your career is your career. And, for many people, that's super important and it's a lifeline as well. But at the end of the day, your health comes first. And I think we're so easy to forget that because I think we're in a world where we're watching other people thrive in their careers and there's money pressures and you just feel like you have to go and progress and progress and progress. And then for someone with PMDD, that is just going to burn you out every month. And actually, the only thing that matters is you being alive and your
yeah.
health. So I think, yeah, that's amazing advice and something that anyone listening to this could take. The last question then. So if people listening to this podcast could take away one key message about PMDD, what would it be?
PMDD doesn't define the person. Yeah, I would say PMDD does not define the person. The person is the person who you know as a whole, and PMDD is just something on the side. And if it can be recognized that that's not the person and it's just something that comes along every
Yeah,
single month, then it's just important to acknowledge that and not take it that PMDD and you are as a whole, I guess, if that makes sense.
I love that, Dimple. Yeah, it does make sense. And I think it's such a nice way to end it because I think, and I know there are so many people, including myself, including you as well, probably, who do think it defines us and think, this is it, this is me. And it takes over. I mean, like you said just then, it's like half the month. So it takes over 50% of your life.
Yeah,
So it does feel like it takes over, but actually it doesn't define you. It's just an aspect of you that can sometimes feel massively overwhelming, but you are the person out of the luteal phase. That's you. That's the real you.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's a really nice way to end this. So thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like, to be honest, I could pick your brains forever, but I just, yeah, want to say a huge thank you. And if anyone wants to continue asking questions to Dimple, I'm sure we'll do another Q&A or episode again soon. But yeah, thank you so much, Dimple.
Thank you for having me.